Hi everyone, welcome back to But What Will People Say? It's Disha here. As always, I hope you're all doing amazing. Just a friendly reminder, as always, this episode is available on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, and YouTube. If you like the show or if you know someone who could benefit from hearing it, please share. We really appreciate it. We're growing slowly and we want to build this community up. You can find me on social media at Dishes by Dishes on Instagram. And if you or someone you know would like to be on the show, you can email BWWPSpodcast@gmail.com. And I think we've finally kind of troubleshot our Skype interview issues. So this is another Skype interview. As always, there might be a little bit of a lag, but we did, I think, correct it. We got the audio sorted this time too with the mics. I hope you guys enjoy today's episode. Our guest today, her name is Dipa. She is the founder of the SAWIR Facebook group, which stands for South Asian Women in Interracial Relationships. Definitely check them out if you think you would benefit from being in the group. They're a really great community. But we talk about, being raised in America and how she kind of met her husband, Austin. And we talk about like the living together and the long distance and embracing different cultures. And it was a really fun conversation. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And without further ado, here we go. So hi, Dipa. She's our guest today, and we're going to let her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her story, and then we'll go from there.
So hi, everyone. I'm Dipa. I am one of the co-founders of SAWIR, South Asian Women in Interracial Relationships. And I met my husband about 9 years ago was when we started dating, and we got married 3 years ago in May. And I'm 29. I live in Indiana, and I am a South Asian woman in an interracial relationship.
Perfect. Right in our demographic.
Yes.
Awesome. And thank you for coming on, because your group was literally such an inspiration for this account. Or not this account, but this podcast, because I would just sit there reading all these girls' stories and be so heartbroken half the time, because I feel because I'm such a bad writer, I would always want to respond, and I'm I have too many words and no capacity to write that out. So then I was podcasting sounds good because I'm good at talking, and I feel it's hard to convey everything in a written out comment to someone.
Yeah, if you've ever read any of my comments on there, I don't know how to edit myself, so I write these really long ranting comments, and then I go back and edit it at least 3 or 4 times. So I'm this isn't conveying what I thought it would mean. So I like this format a lot. I'm really glad that you were able to start it, because I'm a huge fan of podcasts, so this is perfect.
Yeah, I'm a podcast person too, so that's how this happened. It's actually not as hard as people think. You kind of just need a mic and a computer for a basic setup.
Yeah.
And it's nice because there's just so many, but they're so niche. It's not I feel Instagram, it's you need to market to everybody. Whereas podcasts, it's you can market to 20,000 people, and that's enough, because you have a tight little corner of the internet that gets to be yours.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to give you a chance to just tell us your story. Go for it.
Sure. All right. So from the beginning, Austin is my husband. We met, like I said, 9 years ago. I actually became friends with one of his best friends, and I started hanging out with him. And then one night, me and a friend of mine decided to throw his friend a birthday party, a surprise little party. And we're hey, just invite your friends over to my house. And he happened to bring Austin, and that was the first time I met him. And we started we didn't really talk much. We kind of hung out in groups for a couple weeks, and then he just started texting me one night, and we started talking. And then he asked me to be his girlfriend. He was will you be my girlfriend? A text. It was really
great.
It was really cute. And I was okay. But the thing was that I was getting ready to leave for London to go study abroad. I had already been accepted to the program for the semester, So he asked me to be his girlfriend a week before I left for London. And so we knew it was going to be like this long distance thing for about 3-ish months. Um, so then I left for London, and then we just kind of communicated over the internet, through emails, and I came back that semester, and I was in school at the time, an hour away from where he lived. So we were a long distance for about a couple of years, and then we ended up living together for a little while right after I got out of college for a few months, and then I changed jobs and he changed jobs, and I went back to living with my parents. And we were just together for a while until we got engaged in 2014. And then we got married in 2016. And my parents, bring my parents into this, my parents knew about him very early on. So this is it's a weird story. So before I left for London, I made sure that my family couldn't see any of our stuff on social media. I blocked them from basically seeing any interaction between the two of us. I had like a whole list of family members that I blocked.
I have that. I still have that.
And I actually just recently stopped using it because I was like, why do I need this anymore? But so I thought it was good. And the only person who knew about Austin before I left was my younger brother, because he happened to be at our house when I was throwing like a little going away party for myself, and my parents were gone. They know about this now. My parents were gone, and my brother was there, and so I introduced him to Austin kind of very casually. So then I left for England, and then when I was coming back to the US. I didn't come back directly to the US. I met my parents in India for a family wedding, and one of my friends was with me because she wanted to come to India with me. So she met me in England, and we both went to India to meet up with my parents. And the very first night we were there, my dad suddenly at like breakfast was like, "So do you have a boyfriend?" And I was like, "What?
What do you know?"
I was like, yeah. And he was like, well, you need to break up with him. I was like, what? Like immediately. That was like the first thing he said. He didn't even know anything about this person. He was just like, you need to break up with him. And then my friend Ashley starts talking about Austin and telling them all these things. And I'm literally trying to like kick her underneath the table and be like, stop talking. Like, stop talking immediately. And she was trying to be helpful. Like, bless her heart, she was trying to be helpful. But it did not. My dad was just immediately like, no, you have to break up with him. And I was like, whatever, Dad. Like, whatever, I'll do what I want. So he didn't really like bring it up anymore the rest of the trip. And when I got back, I was like, how did they ever even find out? Like, I was so careful. And so I asked my brother, I was like, did you tell Mom and Dad about Austin? And he was like, no. While I was in England, my family had traveled to California for a baby shower. And one of my cousins there was like, oh, does Dipa have a boyfriend? And Kusha's like, I don't know, maybe, I guess. And I was like, how did she even know? Because she was blocked. And I realized months later that while I was in England, I became really close friends with this guy, and he was gay. He was my gay best friend in England. And so we had tons of pictures together, and we were always like hugging and like really close in the pictures because just was our friendship. And I realized my family thought that I was dating my gay best friend. So like that's who they thought my boyfriend was for the longest time. And it was like, I didn't realize that until a long time later. I was like, that's who they thought Austin was. They thought it was Tyler, but it was not. And so, yeah, my parents were very against it in the beginning. There was a lot of like arguments of like, we should have raised you differently, or we should have raised you in India. Like this isn't what we wanted. And, there was a lot of tears. There was a lot of like back and forth. I think it kind of helped that I lived an hour away at college. So I wasn't living with my parents all the time, and we didn't always see each other. But I did notice they like would kind of be like, oh, we're going to come visit you. And they had like not visited me in like the 2 years previously that I was at school. Right. So they were like checking up on me a little bit more, or they would like call me a little bit more to see where I was. And I'm a bad liar. So like most of the time they knew that I was like lying about something, and then they'd like lecture me and stuff. And it just kind of became like this whole, I remember one time my dad called me and told me I needed to change my Facebook profile picture because it was of me in Austin. And I don't know, it just like, it was this whole, thing, like it was literally, what will people say? Like that was always their argument and stuff, because they were very involved in the Indian community in my hometown. It's a small Indian community, like maybe 150 families. So like everyone is in everyone's business. So yeah, it was very much like a whole, what will people say? Like, what will people think? And before I'd always kind of brought up the idea of being in a relationship with someone who wasn't Indian. And they were like, okay, they were like, that's fine. Like, as long as they're from a good family and they're a doctor or like a pharmacist, the basic like Indian approved careers. And I don't think it really helps that my husband is not from that background. Like his mom passed away when he was young. He was raised by a single father who wasn't exactly there for him. But he has a really great grandmother and a really amazing uncle who kind of are the backbone of his family, and we're really close to them. And he has his grandmother on his father's side is really great. And so he had that family structure, but it wasn't traditional like my parents imagined. Like they couldn't meet his parents, you know what I mean? And he didn't, he wasn't in college at the time that we met. So when we met, I was 20 and he was 19. Our birthdays are 5 years apart, so he's almost exactly a year younger than me. And he had a like untraditional upbringing. He was one of those kids that kind of had to like get a job when he was a teenager because that's how he could support himself. And he didn't have the family structure to support him to like go into college and do college full time because his parents could pay for all of his things. Like that wasn't his life. And then also he has a lot of tattoos. I love it. He has almost 2 full sleeves of tattoos, and they're all like comic book and movie related and stuff. But with Indian parents, like immediately he was like this wrong side of the tracks, like drug dealer kid. That's what he was to them. And I remember one time we had to come to my house because I had lost one of my contacts. And so I needed to go home to get my glasses. And I was like, okay, my parents should not be home right now, so this should be safe. And they were pulling out of the driveway as we were pulling into the driveway. And they just gave us the dirtiest look in the world. And they didn't even like ask to meet him. They just looked at him from afar and they're like, Dipa, what are you doing? And I was like, I just need to get my glasses. And they're like, and they like drove away. And then my brother tells me when we walk into the house, he's like, Mom and Dad called and told me to keep an eye on you.
Great.
It was like very, not great. But the first time they met him was my college graduation. So they're like, and they brought it up. I didn't even bring it up. Like at this point, I think they kind of accepted the fact that we were together and we were like not going to stop being together. So they were like, hey, is Austin going to be there at your graduation? I was like, yeah. And they're like, okay, well then we can meet him and we can get dinner together afterwards. I was like, what? Like, what is this?
Whoa.
It was a big deal. He was so nervous. He was so nervous. We went and bought him like a new shirt. He wore a black long sleeve button down shirt for graduation in Indiana in May when it was like 90 degrees outside, just so he could hide his tattoos and they wouldn't be offended by them. He was probably dying. Like it was so hot outside. But they met him at graduation. They were great. They kind of like just we took some pictures together. We went to dinner afterwards. I don't even remember what we talked about or like what. I don't remember any of it. I think that I just blanked that out, but it went very well. It was very civil. And then afterwards, they knew that I was going to go live with him and some friends. So, which they didn't oppose, which was very surprising. They were very nonchalant about it. They knew that I had gotten a job in a different town and that I was going to move in with him and 3 of our friends. And Yeah, that was really weird how they accepted that. But then after that, I ended up moving back home because I decided that job wasn't for me. And once I moved back home, I started bringing him around a little bit more. Like, he would come over and say hi, or he would come to like a family event. My dad would be like, "Oh, is he gonna come to this thing that we're having at our house?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure. I'll tell him to come." Um, and then my dad is a pharmacist and he started his own pharmacy in the time that we started dating. And so I was asked my dad, I was like, "Do you know of anyone that like has any job openings?" Because Austin was looking for a job. And he was like, "Well, why doesn't he come see if he can work for me?" And I was like, "I don't know if this is a good idea." I'm not sure this is what we want. But he went and he started working for my dad, and he did really well. My dad, like, by the time my dad recently sold his pharmacy, but he was like my dad's like number one employee. If my dad wasn't around, Austin had to be there to take care of stuff. So it worked out really well. And then he actually started living with my parents because he's from a town that's about 30 minutes south of where we live. And so he was driving every day. And my parents were like, "Why are you driving? Like, just come stay here." So he started living with my parents. I wasn't even living with my parents at the time. At that point, I had moved out because I'd gotten a different job somewhere else. So I was living an hour away and he was living with my parents.
That's amazing.
But yeah, that really like kind of grew their relationship, and my mom taught him how to make chai better than I know how to make chai. I didn't even know how to make chai at the time. Um, and she taught him how to make his favorite sack and like just other different things. And he helped her around the house. And my mom's one of those people that if someone helps her around the house and like she gives him 5 tasks and then he finishes them and she gives him 5 more, like that's the kind of person she is. Like she appreciates those people. So my mom and him have a really funny relationship now. Like he messes with her a lot. Like he'll play pranks on her and stuff, and she'll like kind of mess with him back, and it's a really fun relationship that they have. So it's all good. It all worked out. They by the time we got engaged, my parents were like, "Are you gonna get married yet, or not, or what's happening?" And then they invited literally 600 people to our place.
Amazing.
It was so big. It was ridiculous because Austin had maybe like 10. Sorry if my nose is like running. Austin had like maybe 15 people there from like his like very small family and some friends, and then my parents had literally all the rest of the people plus my friends. It was ridiculous. But we did like a whole 4-day like my big fat Indian wedding type of thing where we did like the mehndi and the sangeet and the Indian wedding, and the next day we had what I called our garden ceremony because it was in a garden. Traditional like white dress, bridesmaids walking down the aisle. Even did father-daughter dance with my dad, which he just kind of sprung on me like during the reception. But it was wonderful, and our family has been pretty great about it. It took them some time, but we got there, and it's pretty good now.
Awesome. Wow.
Yeah. I was originally going to hyphenate our last name because I was just never a fan of giving up your last name.
Yeah, I feel like it's a step back for feminism.
Yes, I agree.
Like
I definitely agree.
I haven't changed my name at all. I'm still Disha Mystery, but like I socially will go by like Disha Mazeppa. It's just easier. But even on like these like my social media and everything, it still says like Mystery Mazeppa because I'm still me with Mike.
Yeah, that's how it is. And so I was going to hyphenate, and then he was going to hyphenate with me to kind of incorporate the two things. But then a couple months before we got married, he's like, "You know what? Like, let's just be Patels." Like, he just liked that idea, and he didn't really feel super connected with his last name because he's closer to his mom's side of the family. So he's like, "I want to be a Patel," and he loves it because when he was working with my dad, people would come in and be like, "Oh, Mr. Patel," and he'd be like, "Yes,
that's me." And people are very confused.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the thing. Even with my name, like when I put Mazeppa in places, like people have no idea what to expect. Like Disha Mazeppa, like what is that? And they're just like this like very short blonde haired kind of tan girl shows up and the whole thing is like, what is happening?
You're messing with people's perceptions too much.
Yeah. Like the image, the name, just everything is not connecting at all.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that they were like, so they kind of like, once they got past the initial, like, okay, she has a boyfriend, clearly in those 2 years, like you guys didn't like break up or like waver in that. And they're like, okay, we're just gonna work with that.
Yeah.
And they took their own approach to just like embracing it and like making it work. And I love that because my family's been like that too. Like once they again got past that initial like, okay, this is a thing, since we've, gotten engaged and gotten married, all of that, like they have been so into just like integrating Mike as much as possible and making him feel comfortable and, not making him feel like an outsider when they talk about certain things or eat certain foods and just like trying their best to like make him feel at home. And that's been very surprising.
Yeah, it's crazy. I feel like sometimes we kind of maybe underestimate our families a little bit and kind of be like, oh, they're going to be so against this. But there's honestly been so many times where I look around, I'm like, how did I get here? Like, I remember going to a cousin's house. This was before we were even engaged. And there was some type of family event happening. And we all went to my cousin's house and we were staying there. And we were trying to figure out who's going to sleep in what room. And the last person left was me. And I was like, where do I go, Mom? And she's like, just go with Austin, because he was already in the guest room. And I was like, what? Like, this is the thing. Sure? She rolled her eyes. She's like, it's fine. Just go.
We're over it. Stop acting like we're not over it.
Yeah. And it was crazy to me because like my aunts and uncles were there. Like all my family was there. And so I was like, okay, I guess we've accepted this now. And I just like walked in there and he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I guess I'm sleeping in here with you. And he's like, okay.
I know. It's almost like they never want to talk about like the whole like sleeping together before sex and not before sex. Great.
Before marriage.
Before you're married. Even I don't know how to talk about it because my parents never talked to me about it. Right. And I've never once addressed like that whole thing. Like I never got the talk.
Mm-hmm. Me neither.
They were just like, it's fine. We're just not going to talk about it.
They're like, they told you in school, right? You're good.
I know. And just like, I don't know, subconsciously put it in your head that you're supposed to wait till you're married. So the fear is still there.
Yes.
Which is like, you never talked about it, but I just knew. I was like, okay.
Yeah. And just honestly, like just the fact like that I was able to, one, acknowledge that I had a boyfriend, bring him to a family event, and then just get to sleep in the same room as him. Like that's it. Was like, I was like, oh my God, I'm just breaking down all kinds of barriers. Yeah. Like I remember thinking that. Yeah. I was like, who am I? Like, what am I doing? Like, imagine like 10-year-old me never would have thought of like anything like this would have been possible. Like, it's crazy.
I think you're right. Like, we really do underestimate what our parents will accept. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like they almost initially like the knee-jerk reaction is negative because like that's what they're supposed to do. Because like, then they can say they at least tried. If anybody asks, they could be like, no, we told her to break up with him. Like, we told him, like, this isn't going to work. You have to end it. Yeah. And then, like, but she didn't. So now we have to work with it. And it's, at least they could say they tried.
Yeah. And I also think it helps, like, having, like, younger family members who kind of just, like, were very nonchalant about it.
Yeah.
Like, my cousins were just kind of like, okay, yeah, that's your boyfriend. And I don't remember them ever, like, saying or doing anything negative. They're like, sure, Austin's here. Like, let's hang out. Like, that was just the way it was.
Same. Like, I'm the oldest of my cousins that live in the U.S. So, like, all the younger ones are basically teenagers. And they're just like, yeah, this is Mike. He's cool. He's coming. And to a point where even before, like, we were engaged or anything, when he was just my boyfriend and my family was kind of, like, getting to know him, like, he threw my cousin's, like, 18th birthday party. And
cute.
Like we, because he has like his parents' house has like a pool and everything, and then her birthday's in the summer. So he was like, yeah, just like have her bring all her friends over and we'll make food and we'll decorate and it'll be great. And so like, he almost unintentionally was like, we are going to merge these families.
Right.
And so, and starting with that, and they had so much fun. My other cousins have started having us like throw their parties. So, like, we've had, like, everyone over at Mike's parents' house just to use the pool.
Right.
Um,
That's so fun.
yeah, and like it's been pretty good. Everyone was like, "Oh, okay, like that was really nice of him," and whatever. Because at first they were a little bit apprehensive, the adults. But my cousins were
Mhm.
like, "No, we're going to Mike's house for a party," and they're like, "All right."
That's great. That's so great. Like I am the youngest on my dad's side and one of the oldest on my mom's side. So it's like a weird in between. But um yeah, my dad's side of the family, they were they were the first to meet him and they were really cool about it. Um and actually one of my cousins, her and I grew up together. She lived with me all um throughout our childhoods and stuff. So we were basically raised like sisters. And then she ended up moving in with my parents at around the same time that Austin was living with them. So the two of them would just go out and have dinner and have drinks, and they were kind of like each other's buddies in the house because they were both having to live with my parents at the time.
And meanwhile, you're like nowhere to be
No,
found.
I'm not. So they formed like a really great bond and they have like a really great relationship. So I was like, I was really appreciative of that. And I think it was really beneficial for the both of them.
I think that's great though that like Austin took on like the initiative to like really like get to know your family and like be open to everything because I think that makes the biggest difference. Because I
Yeah,
feel like the negativity from our parents comes from like a fear that like how will that other person and their family ever accept us,
right.
and then they realize like even like little things like Mike, he always comes to everything. And like when we had Diwali dinner at my aunt's house and like he wore like the Indian clothes and like showed
Hmm.
up and they were just like so appreciative. Or like he'll always eat whatever we make and like he doesn't like make a stink about it because that's their fear. That's what they think
Right,
is going to happen. And then like when they've been exposed to how like open him and his family are, they've just they're so much better now
right.
and like accepting and understanding, and like that fear has been slowly like taken away.
That I 100% agree with that. And we see that, I think, a lot in SAWIR in the conversations that people have where they're like, oh, like my boyfriend's meeting my parents for the first time. Like, how do I get them to connect? Or, how do I kind of bring my boyfriend and my family together? And a lot of those suggestions are always just like, have them hang out, like,
Yeah.
show them that he really is trying, like, make food with your family or go to events with your family or, show up in the clothes and the different things and just show that like
Yeah.
they're making an effort to try the different things of the
Yeah.
cultures and learn about the culture, and that's really where it comes from. And if they're dating you, they're already willing to learn
Exactly.
about
Like
the culture.
your
If you're
parents
like,
just have to
yeah,
see it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and like they're already committed to like being in your life, and so it's like your culture is a part of your life, so you just kind of expose your parents to the fact that they're really trying to do this. And you know, um,
Yeah. And they don't
they're
have to do a lot. It's I
no.
found that it takes just like being like respectful and
Hmm.
being open, and like that's not asking for a lot because like you said, like when they're dating you, they already know what the territory is.
Yeah,
They know it's a different culture and like different ideas and traditions. And like if they're open to that with just you, of course, being open continually with the rest of your family
hmm,
is they're just keep doing what they're doing.
exactly. Like my dad taught Austin how to say like Jai Swaminarayan or Jesse Krishna and stuff. And so when people would come into the pharmacy and they were Indian, he started saying that to people, and my dad was like so proud.
Yeah.
Like, so proud.
Mike says Jesse Gershner to people and they're like, yes, he's one of us.
Yeah, it's like he started incorporating like little words into his vocabulary that were Gujarati, and like my parents love it. Like he doesn't say water anymore; he says pani only,
Right.
like only pani. And he loves the word for squirrel, which like giskoli, so he like only refers to him as giskoli, and it's like my parents love that.
Yeah, exactly. Mike has done the same thing. He's like randomly figured out a few words he really likes to say. And he'll just randomly be like, oh, Bhagwan. Oh,
Yeah,
Bhagwan.
yeah,
Or like,
Austin does that too.
or like how I always play like Garba music. So he just starts going around yelling like Dol Baje to people. And my family thinks it's hilarious.
Yeah, has he tried garba?
Yes, we did at our wedding, instead of having a Garba night, we incorporate it into the last 30 minutes of our reception. So to wind down the night, we had Garba music played and everybody did it. And he did it the whole time. His family was there, like, and everyone was like so amazed. I'm like, guys, give him some credit here. Like, it's not that hard.
So Austin did Garba for the first time in India. We were in India for my cousin's wedding, the cousin that he lived with at my parents' house. And he picked it up pretty fast, but he has to look at his feet while he does it. He can't do the hands and the feet at the same time.
We'll get there.
But he tries, and he picked it up pretty fast. And at our wedding, he did Garba like the whole time too. But yeah, it's just like, it's those little things that kind of like, everyone's like, oh my God, he like does Garba. Or when we went to India, he could kind of greet my whole family and ask them how they were. He knew the basics of that. And they were just so impressed by that. Or like he was eating the food and stuff, as long as it wasn't too spicy.
Yeah, he'll start sweating.
Yeah, but he loved India and like Indian food, and like he wanted to go and like do all the things and try all the stuff, and he made an effort to like communicate with my family as best he could, and that was really great.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's one thing. Like Mike also, like, he really wants to go to India and like visit my family there, and like also do like the touristy things. And I'm so apprehensive because I'm like, one, I myself cannot just take him because I don't know my way to like navigate any of it. Like, I speak Gujarati and like I know how to get to my family and stuff, but like that's the extent of it. Like I don't know where anything is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know how like people are gonna react, or like how to explain like the whole situation to them. So like, how did you go about that? Like, did you prep him at all?
So I don't fully remember what I did to prep him. So we went to India. We were already planning on going to India, but he proposed to me a few months before we went. So I was taking him, and I was taking one of my best friends who is also not Indian. And I think my parents must have like prepped my family and like all the immediate people that we were coming, because my dad wanted us to do like an engagement ceremony when we were in India. So that side of the family, like all the Indian family, could be there. And then I remember just kind of like, I don't even know. I remember prepping him about like the food is going to be spicy, or, you know, you're going to see a lot of poverty and stuff, and kind of preparing him for that. And I was like, there's going to be a lot of street dogs. Like, you just have to accept that they're street dogs, because he loves animals. And so he was like, but the puppies.
Dude, that's Mike every time we go to a foreign country and he sees a stray dog. He's like, it's a dog. We should take it home. I'm like, no, it's a street dog. Like, honey, we can't take it home.
No. So I don't remember how much prep I actually gave him, but he handled it very well. And I think it helped that I had one of my friends with me, or one of our friends, I guess. She's both of our friends. She was there with us, and everyone assumed they were siblings, by the way, even though they're not, because they're just both white people who came.
That's like here.
Me, so,
like you know a brown person. Oh, I know a brown person too. You must know them. And it's like, no.
No, not at all. And also my cousin that was getting married, her friends from here came as well. So there was like a whole group of like 4 or 5 white people that were in my family's village the first time he went to India. So he wasn't the only one. There was like a lot of other people for everyone to gawk at. So yeah, I don't honestly even remember what I had said to kind of prepare him for all of it, but he full-heartedly like kind of went into it. And I remember us like leaving the airport and like driving the streets for the first time. And he's like, holy crap.
Yep.
Like, this is intense. This is like a video game.
Yeah, and literally, it's like Mario Kart.
Yeah, there were so many times that he like tried to record it. He's like, I need to show people back home how terrifying
it is.
But he fell in love with like Indian Subway, because we had one in our town. And like he refused to order any of the regular Subway options. He would only order the Indian Subway options. And then my family took him. We went to like New Delhi to see the Taj Mahal and like go to Agra and all that. And we stopped at the McDonald's for his and Courtney, my friend's, benefit. And he refused to order any of the regular McDonald's item stuff. He would only order the Indian stuff, and it was all spicy, and he couldn't eat it, but he would only order it.
I love the effort.
He tried so hard. And like, yeah, he loved India. Like the first time we went, he was like, "Can we just like move here for a while?" He's like, "We just live off of our money." I'm like, "Absolutely not. We're not going to move here." But yeah, he loved it. My friend Courtney loved it. People would stop him. Oh, this is the thing. If you're white and you go to like any popular tourist area in India, people will stop you and ask you to take pictures with you.
Yes, I've seen that. I feel like they all assume you're a celebrity or something.
Yes. And at first, like it happened to both him and Courtney. And they were like, "Oh, you want me to take a picture of you?" And they're like, "No, we want you in our picture." So many times they were stopped and they were just like in people's pictures. And
we found a white man.
Like, it's crazy. And it happened to my cousin's friends too, especially because her husband was very tall, and he was like this really tall white guy, and then she was like this really cute blonde girl, and they were obsessed with her hair, and they would not leave it alone. So any white person going to India, just be warned, you're gonna feel like a celebrity. He loved it though. My husband loved it.
I feel like Mike would love it too. He's like, "This is amazing. This is great."
Yeah. Yeah. Also, people assumed he was Mexican the whole time we were there because he has really dark hair, and he has like, he's white, but it's like a slightly tan white. Mm-hmm. And even when we were in Mexico, he got assumed for being Mexican, and he's like, "No, I'm not." We did 23andMe, and we found out he's 100% white European. He was very disappointed.
Mike has also done it. He is 100% white.
Yes, like every white European country, like he's got
the Caucasus Mountains, Russia, Ukraine, Italy, like as white as they come. And it's funny because he was like doing it, and he's like, "I can't wait to find out what I am." I'm like, "Sweetie, you're white." Yeah. Like, I hate to break it to you, but you're white.
Like, we were honestly surprised. Like, I thought maybe he would have some sort of like Native American or something in him, and it was like, "No, you're English, Irish, French, German, Norwegian." Yeah. Yes. Every white country.
Basically.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I feel like it's, as much as we talk about like them embracing Indian culture and like us wanting them to like understand who we are, there's also like the other side of like we have to be open to like American culture, and it's like these little things that are coming up, like that's American culture, like being obsessed with dogs and like doing 23andMe, or like how both of our husbands are obsessed with like comic books and Star Wars, and I'm like, that's American culture. Like, and you know, we take it for granted because like, you know, we were raised here, and so we know about it, and like, you know, he didn't know about Shah Rukh Khan until I told him, but still it's like there is a little bit of like, as he loves saying, like, white people have no culture. I'm like, you do. It's just different. And you just take it for granted because you're in it.
I think it's interesting. Like, white people culture, honestly, like, it's a little sad because like when a lot of white families like immigrated to the US, they had to assimilate so quickly because they were all from so many other countries. And like, I think Mike touched on it on his podcast, like Italian Americans and like Irish Americans, and were kind of discriminated against when they first came here. And so they kind of had to like assimilate into everything else that was going around them. And in order to assimilate, you kind of lose a part of that culture, which I think Italian Americans have done a very good job of keeping their culture, especially food wise and stuff. But like all the other like English and Irish and all of that kind of blends all together a little bit. And so a lot of like white Americans don't know where they're from or what their origins are, or until they do like 23andMe, and then they kind of can figure it out. But it's been lost through the generations kind of forcibly. And I think that's kind of why, like, when people come into our culture, they're like so amazed by it because we are so directly connected to it. Yeah. And like, yes, I was born and raised in the US, and I'm the first person in my family to be born and raised in the US, but I still have this direct connection to this culture that he never got to have a direct connection to.
Yeah. I think we're also like a newer group of immigrants. Like I'm essentially first generation. Like, even though I wasn't born here, I was raised here. And so we don't have as much of a gap yet between like the grandparents who came here and, you know, the future generations.
That'll be interesting to see once that kind of starts to build. You know what I mean? Like Indian Americans are still fairly new. We haven't we're kind of just coming into ourselves as like
we're still adjusting
culture.
Which is why this podcast exists, because we're still adjusting. Still figuring it out.
That's one thing I think I had mentioned is like the whole Indian American identity kind of thing, because when we first started SAWIR, I noticed a lot of girls posting about like, oh, my American boyfriend or my American husband. I'm like, wait a minute, let's stop for a minute. Like, you were either born here or you were raised here, and you are also American. Like, you are a part of the American identity and you get to claim that. So I made this whole post about how, like, let's be careful about how we identify our significant other, because yes, they are American, but you are also American and you also get to claim it. So it's okay if you want to identify them as like white or Caucasian or of European descent or anything like that, because if we start only describing white people or non-brown people as American, then people are, like, it kind of reflects back on you. Like, people are going to see you as like non-American as well, or at least that's how I feel about it. So
that's a pet peeve I really have, is when like people, and this is more in like our parents' generation, where like they would refer to the kids or like me or somebody they saw, and they'd be like, she's so American, and they would say it like it was an insult. Like, and you know, I understand that that's their generation clinging on to their culture and all of that, but it really bothers me when our generation does it to each other, like, oh, she's so American. Like, you know, I get it a lot. Like, when I moved from where I went to school in middle school and elementary school, then I moved to another town where there were a lot of Indian kids. And before that, I was one of like 5 Indian kids in the whole district. And so by the time I was 14 or 15 when we moved, I was called whitewashed. And so I very quickly got like rejected from like the Indian kid group, because they're like, oh, you're so white. And it's like, what do you mean? Like, and I get it. I didn't grow up around a lot of other Indian kids. So like, in order to fit in, like, that's just the personality I had. But then in my old school, it was like, oh, like, you're so Indian, like when it came to certain things, like the Indian food for lunch and like dressing a certain way. And then when I moved, the Indian kids were like, oh, you're so white. And it was like awkward navigating, like, so where do I fit in? And then like, as I got older, just embracing like, I'm Indian and I'm American, and being an American is not a crime. It's not something you insult somebody for. It's you have to embrace like, this is who we are, and we can be both things, and we don't have to pick a side.
100%. I've had so many like rants about that, about how like I just growing up, like I used to describe myself as like 40% Indian, 60% American or something like that, because I thought I had to like divide those two things in me. And being like the first person in my family born and raised in the US, like it kind of happened to me through my family as well. They're like, oh, you're getting so American, or oh, you're like, I would bring something up and they'd be like, we've never heard about that, that's too American. And we had a very small Indian community in my town, and all the other kids around me were also first generation Indian, but somehow I still didn't fit in exactly with it. And it like didn't quite make sense to me. And it took me a really long time to kind of be like, you know what, I can be Indian and I can be American. And those are two of the exact same things, and they're not mutually exclusive. And the way that I choose to be Indian, like, doesn't make me more or less. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't, like, I choose certain parts of my identity that I'm like, okay, I'm really into this certain thing in Indian culture, but I'm not so into this thing that I feel is kind of patriarchal in Indian culture, and it doesn't make me any less Indian. And I noticed like my cousins who spent most of their lives here, and they sometimes are like, oh, well, you know, that's an American thing. I'm like, but no, that's your thing. Like, that can be your thing too. Like, you have spent your whole life here, like 90% of your life here. Like, you get to do that. Or I have younger cousins who were born here, and I remember like talking, and they're describing someone, and they're like, oh, you know that American person? I was like, no, not American person. You are also American. You've literally never lived anywhere else.
This is all
like,
you're
talking about. Yeah, I was like, you're talking about that white person, and it's okay to call them that white person, because that's not an insult. That's just their racial identification. Like, that's okay.
Yeah, like we refer to each other as brown people.
Right.
And when Mike first heard that, he's like, what do you mean brown people? They're just people. And I'm like, Right, but we just as a community, like, we're brown. You know,
Yes.
you're white,
Yeah.
we're brown. It's fine. Nobody's
Yeah.
insulted. No one's offended. Stop being triggered. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
And then
And
he has come to understand, like, that's just what you call yourselves.
right. And it's not a derogatory or negative thing. It's just kind of what you identify as and kind of embracing what you identify as. And yeah, the whole putting especially girls down for being too American drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Like
it's such a pet peeve because it's like this is what it is to be American. It's to be this like blended kind of mix up of like you know, wherever you're from, whether that be like Mexico or Italy or India or whatever. Like that's the American dream. That's the story. Is
right.
we can be whatever kind of mix up we want, and we can be celebrate the parts of our culture we love, and it's okay and not a crime to let go of the things we don't agree with. You know, like Mike and I always talk about, like, when we eventually do have kids, like, there are things that I would like to carry over, but then there's things that I'm like, we can let it go. It's fine. You know, I don't believe in it. I don't agree with it. I don't want to put that on my kids.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And it's not a crime. It doesn't make you, like, you don't insult somebody for choosing to embrace certain things and not other things, I guess. I don't know.
You know what? I think it's a lot easier for this next generation of Indian American kids, because I notice, like, my nieces, like, they're in high school / early college, and they are also first generation American because their parents came here, like, their mom came here when she was a teenager herself, and like their dad grew up in England. And so they have a different understanding of it. And they live in like the suburbs of Chicago. So there's obviously a ton of other Indian families there. And they grew up in this like very Indian American culture, specifically because there were so many other families there that were going through the same thing. And so I see them navigating it a lot easier than I did. Like, I don't see them having to like feel torn in one direction or the other, because they graduated with literally 20 other Patels in their class. Like, and that's just like, they were all doing the same thing at the same time. And there were so many of them, and it just felt totally normal for them to balance those two things. And I'm like, oh, that must have been nice.
Yeah. And I noticed the exact same thing with my younger cousins who are the same age group, like the Gen Z generation of like Indian kids, is they have such an easier time. And I think a big part of it is like when I grew up, and like probably when we grew up around the same time, there was no Indian representation. And it was kind of pre-internet, you know, like there wasn't as much like seeing other people that looked like us. Like there was no Mindy Kaling, there was no Hassan Minaj, there was no seeing an Indian person being a news anchor or being an artist or being a musician. Like it was like, we are all Indian, we all become doctors and go to law school or whatever.
Exactly.
And so you know, I really grew up in a world where I thought like if you were Indian, like you couldn't be an artist, you couldn't do something creative. And so there's this whole generation of Indian kids like us, like the millennials, that have these like, you know, / like, oh, for me, I'm an OT / I'm a baker, food blogger, now podcasting person, like doing more like media, social related things. Because when I grew up, I didn't even think that was an option. So, you know, I went to school and I went into the medical field because that's what I thought, that's what we did.
Right.
And they're growing up in a world where like all these like faces of like the South Asian spectrum are represented. And so they see the possibility of being beyond a doctor and a lawyer and like marrying another Indian person or someone of the same religion or background as you. And they're dragging their parents through with it because they're like, no, look, she did it. It's fine. But we didn't have that.
Yeah, I agree. We were kind of like this in-between generation, and now we're kind of coming into this age of where like, oh my God, there were people, like we didn't know that Mindy and Hassan and Aziz and all of them were out there doing this stuff because they hadn't become famous yet. We didn't know that there was other people. We didn't have social media either. We were kind of like coming up with social media. So like now I'm like, oh, if we would have seen all of this growing up, then we would have also been like, I can do that too.
Exactly.
But they were all kind of the same age as us. So we all like kind of didn't know that the other people existed out there. Like groups like Little Brown Diary or Subtle Curry Traits. Like I entered those groups and I was like, holy shit,
Yes,
there's other
literally, I was like,
people
oh my
me.
God, where did you all come from?
Right? I was like, where were you when I was a child?
Literally, I joined that group. It's been like maybe a year, not even, since I joined. And like
Yeah.
every day, it just blows my mind.
Exactly. And
I'm like, where was this when like MySpace, when your only friend was Tom?
Right. Right. I was like, we literally had all the same upbringing. Somehow, none of us were connected, but we all had the same upbringing. We understand the same jokes. Like, I was like, these are my people. Like, I found my people. And I feel like in the last like year or so, I've really started to like embrace my Indian American identity because of these groups that I found. Like, I'm like, oh my God, like it wasn't just me going through these things, like literally everybody else is going through it too.
Exactly. It's crazy.
It's so crazy.
But
they're so the younger generations
to social
are so
media.
lucky.
They are. But at the same time, like my cousins always say, they're like, somebody had to do it and you just happen to be that person.
Right.
You know, because now my whole family's just like, all right, well, it was fine when Disha did it. So like it's that much less for them. Like I grew up and like anytime I like dated a guy, even in like high school or whatever, like there's, like you said, like blocking all your family on social media, making sure no one found out or saw anything. And, you know, I have cousins that like they have boyfriends and like they just like tell their parents like, yeah, I'm going out with my boyfriend. And I'm like, what? I'm sorry, we're just casually gonna throw that out there? Okay.
Right. So my cousins, my younger cousins, I hope that I've done that for them. I don't know. They're all like there's a weird group of them. There's like a group of them that are in college / just graduated college. And then there's a group of them that are like in middle school, high school. So it's like a divide. And then all my ones on my dad's side are married and older than me. So I'm kind of hoping that like if one of them does, you know, show up with like a non-Indian partner, that their family is like, okay, cool, because they saw me go through it, and I kind of opened that door for them, and they're like, all right, it's not that bad, or they can come to me if they need to. But a lot of my younger cousins have grown up in very like Indian American communities, so I could see them not doing that at all, like just kind of marrying someone who's also Indian American because they just had access to those people. You know what I mean?
That's also a big part of it, just like access. If you grew up in like middle America, like you maybe didn't
Indiana, have that yes.
Yeah. It's funny because I grew up in New Jersey, but like my parents, like we lived in Belleville, and like there was really no brown people. I think there were 10 in the whole school district. And of course we all knew each other and all of our parents knew each other. But like, you know, we weren't like all in the same grade either. Like we're spread out in the entire district.
Right.
You know, and then by the time I moved, I was in high school. And like I said, like I didn't really fit in. So all my friends were like these like white blonde girls. And the other Indian kids, they're like, because they went to school together their whole lives, like they had their little cliques, like, you know, and they're all friends with each other. They're still friends with each other, and like, great, awesome. But like, for me, I was like late to the game.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah. I don't know what I would have done if my family had like moved to a more Indian population, because I just didn't know how to fit in, I think, with other Indian kids. Because all the ones I grew up with were either a couple years older than me or a couple years younger than me. And we were friends when we were younger and we hung out. But I think, and then all of us, I've noticed all the Indian kids I grew up with have very like white friend circles. Like we were never best friends with each other. We were always best friends with other people. And then we hung out when we were together at Indian events and things like that. So it was, we kind of, and none of the, no, that's a lie. I actually know quite a few people that I grew up with who aren't in relationships with Indian people. It's actually kind of rare to find someone that I grew up with who's in a relationship with an Indian person.
Growing up, through our like cultural organization, I was a dancer, and like those were my Indian friends growing up. Like, and we were very close. I was best friends with them. I'm still friends with them now. Like, we don't see each other as often now because we're like adults and shit. But you know, like you said, it was like when we were together, we were all friends and we always hung out. But then outside of that, we all had like very diverse friend groups because we didn't go to school together. You know, it's not like we lived in the same town. And now that we're older, like they've all kind of like started dating or are married to or engaged to not other Indian people. Because that's just like what we, I guess, I grew up with. And like that's, and it's cool seeing it now. But like when we were younger, like those were the only other like Indian kids I met, and I saw them like once or twice a week at dance practice, and when our parents would like organize for us to get together. But otherwise, like our friends in school were like not also other Indian kids.
Yeah, it's like going back to, it's just exposure and environment. Like if you didn't have that many Indian kids growing up, plus if you knew each other since you were kids, you're like, you don't see them in the same way. You know,
No, it's weird.
You're like, this is weird. This is too weird.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my goodness. All right. So I guess like moving forward, I feel like I love like the random rants I end up on with these conversations.
Great.
That's why I love the like podcast format. Just do whatever you want.
It's so wonderful.
Well, one thing you talked about was the long distance thing, and I know a lot of our listeners like at least have experienced it or are experiencing it. So like, what was that like? Like, how did you make that work?
I think so. When I was in England, and the thing for us is like, we knew it was only going to be 3 months. It wasn't going to be that much of a distance, was only going to be 3 months. So, and I actually really,
it was very early on though, I feel like. It wasn't like, oh, we've been together for a while and now we're going to do long distance for a little bit just because of school and stuff. It was like, you guys, I feel like just started dating. We're like, we're going to do long distance now.
Yeah. I was like, bye, going to England. Yeah. And it was, I think we both had this mentality of like, some people get into a relationship and they're like, are we exclusive? Are we not exclusive? Like, what is this? And we both kind of had the mentality like, okay, we're dating, so we're dating. Like we're in it 100%. And that was just a mutual thing we never actually talked about, but that's just how we both felt. So we were committed to it from the very beginning, even though we were in different countries. And looking back, we both actually have talked about how we appreciated that time because it let us get to know each other without having to deal with any of the other stuff in between. You know, like you get nervous when you're hanging out together or like things like that. Like we got to really just talk. That's all we had to do was talk. So we asked each other about like our lives and like our past and like things that we wanted in the future and like just talked about our day, and we just got to know each other's personalities really well. And so by the time that I got back, we were very comfortable with one another, and we were very kind of, I feel like where someone else might be at like the 3-month stage in their relationship, we were more like 6 months to a year into our relationship, even though we'd actually only been together for 3 months. So I think communication is honestly just the biggest thing when you're dealing with long distance. Is just you have to trust each other, because if you don't trust that the other person is, you know, doing what they say they're doing, then
it's never going to work.
Yeah, you're just jealous and you're paranoid all the time. So we really trusted each other. We communicated a lot. We made time to communicate with each other because, like, I was in England. I was having fun. I was kind of going to class, mostly just exploring the city.
Just the typical study abroad experience.
Right? Going to a different country every weekend because Ryanair flights are really cheap. So we knew what was going on in the other person's life at all times. And if you can't do that, if you feel like that's too much or it's too clingy, then like, I don't know if long distance relationships are right for you.
Yeah. But I think you're right. Like having the trust is so important because I was, you know, sometimes people will say like, oh, I'm not sure. Like, I don't know what he's doing. And I'm like, well, if that makes you insecure, either you're not ready for a long distance relationship or you don't trust that person. And there's a reason for that. Whether that be a personal issue or an issue that has come up because of the other person. Like if you don't have the trust and like you said, like you went into it making it work. And it sounds cliche, but like that's what it is. Like you either sign up for it to work or you're trying to find excuses to get out of it.
Yeah, I agree. Like you have to kind of go into it with a very like committed mentality. And I don't know if that came from me, like just because every relationship I've seen has been very committed from the beginning with very little interaction. Like my parents met 2 weeks before they got married. So that's the mentality I had, I guess. But I didn't know. Austin was my first boyfriend. I'd never even been on a date before I met him. Um, and so I didn't know that I was going to end up with this person. I wasn't planning on ending up with this person. I just knew that if I was committing to this relationship, I was committing to it in the moment.
Yeah.
So that was my thing. And then when I got back, I lived an hour away and he actually didn't have a car at first. So he couldn't come visit me. So I would come on weekends and I would visit him. And we would, he'd eventually did get a car. So we would kind of take turns in this process. But if I had like something going on, or if my friend was having a birthday party or something, I'd be like, I'm not coming this weekend, or, I'm busy this weekend. You can come if you want, but I don't know if I'm going to like, have time, or you're invited to this thing that I'm going to, so you can come with me. And so it's kind of one of those things where like, you have to either commit to seeing each other in the time that you have, or you have to be okay with not seeing each other all the time.
Yeah.
And having that relationship over the phone or over video chat or whatever it is. So
I hear you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really just you have to figure out what works for you and what you're willing to do. And you do have to sacrifice a little bit, because there were weekends where I was like, okay, I'm going to go visit Austin. I'm not going to hang out with my friends this weekend or do this other thing this weekend because I want to go visit Austin.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of give and take.
I think a little bit of is also like this FOMO culture where our generation is very afraid to commit to anything. Like even just making plans on a Friday night. Like if I know people where like if I ask them like 3 weeks out, like, hey, this date, are you free to hang out? And like it's always like, oh, like I don't really know yet, or like they'll say yes, but then as you get closer to the date, they like bail on you. And like this fear of like missing out. Like if I commit to something or someone now, like, and the same thing goes with like how Mike and I met on Tinder. Like, what if I miss out on somebody better? Like, look at all these options I have, and we have too many options almost.
Yeah.
And it's like it's good and bad. But like you said, like even with Mike and I, like we, at first was like very casual and we put no pressure on it. But then like once we were committed, like we're committed, we're making this work. And like, when things would happen or life would get busy or I was in grad school or I moved to New York, like it was never like, oh, are we going to get through this? It's we're going to make it work.
Right. Yeah.
It's never like a question.
Yeah, that's the thing is like I was so surprised by people that I've come across that their relationship is such a question. Like they got into an argument one night and you're like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm like, no, like how is that? Like, how do you not know if you're actually together or not?
Like do you want it to work out or not?
Right. And so there was never, I think there was never like a question of, are we together? Are we not together? Or is this working type of thing? It was always like, we're going to make it work.
Yeah.
And so I've asked Austin, I was like, was there ever a moment where like you ever thought about breaking up with me? And he did say there was this one time, and I agreed with him. And it was just a time where I was personally like going through a lot of stuff and like I was not handling it well. So I was personally in like a dark place. And he was like, yeah, you were kind of mean back then. And he was like, but I wanted to still be with you. So, I loved you. I was just, you were a lot to handle like during that time.
Yeah.
And I was like, I fully understand you, but it's one of those things. It's like, if your person is going through a tough time, or if you're going through a tough time, like, are you willing to stick that out?
And like, that's like, those are the like make it or break it moments. Like everything's great when things are easy, but it's when things are maybe not perfect, but you're figuring it out. That makes like a big difference. 'Cause with Mike and I, like, because it was such a casual start, it's mostly out of fear on my end. Like I had so many like failed heartbreaks and relationships just because like I was in grad school and like when life got hard, those guys bailed. And when I met Mike, it was in the summer. So I was only in summer school and I was just about wrapping that up. So I was about to have like a month and a half or so with like nothing but work to commit to. And so I told him, I was like, this is only for the summer. I mean, we're done at the end of this because I go back to grad school and I don't have time for this. And like, it was just me protecting myself and mentally just writing it off to start with. And just over time, like Mike showed me that it didn't matter. Like grad school, like me being busy wasn't going to be a reason to make me feel bad or bail
Right.
on me. And so like even at the end of summer, like we like kind of broke up, but like we kept in touch. And then like Mike just like took it upon himself to like make the effort to show up. Like he would come to Seton Hall. He would come to the library and watch me study because that was how he was going to see me. And, you know, I look like a hobo most days in grad school. It's like there's no makeup, my hair's not done, like I probably didn't shower, I don't know. And he didn't care, you know, he would just show up and he would come with like my favorite snacks or like whatever little bit in like the whatever 3 or 4 months we had before I went back to school that like he had picked up, like, oh, she loves sweet potato fries, she, you know, this is how she studies or this is what she does. And like whatever he picked up, pulled that together and like showed me that like me being busy wasn't going to be an issue, or me being in school or me having to keep him a secret wasn't going to be an issue. And then that gave me enough like reassurance that like, okay, like let's like really do this, you know, like make this official. Like I was the one to ask him to be my boyfriend, but in his head he was like, you're already my girlfriend, why are you asking me that? I'm like, you don't know what I'm doing, you don't know if I'm talking to someone else. He's like, you're not. He's like, you're in school all day, and then when you're not, you're with me, or like I'm around, like I hang out with you all the time. What do you like? Obvious. Like he's like, you're my girlfriend. Shut up.
That's hilarious. I love that. Can I just say, like, I love the fact that you guys met on Tinder and stuff, because honestly, I was never on a dating app because I was only 20 when I met Austin, and dating apps were like just starting to become like a thing back then, back in 2000, what, 10, 9? I don't know. And I honestly am like so freaked out by like the things that are like, I am so glad that I never had to do that because that sounds horrible.
The internet is a scary place.
Yeah, just dating apps are terrible, but I love the fact you guys met on Tinder and it like worked, and that's just adorable.
And it's funny because Tinder has a whole success story section now.
That's
like if you so when we like got engaged, I reached out to Tinder and I was like, is there any way to like find our first conversations together and stuff? And they're like, oh, we have a whole email for that. You can email them. They'll let you download your info and like and they're like, tell us your story. And like I think they have like a whole blog on it or something.
Oh my gosh. Well, good for Tinder. It was so much for hookups, but I guess they've got some really good stories out of it. So
yeah, I think like because they came out and like you said, it was like a hookup app. Like you just like, it was not meant to be anything serious. And then after a few years, like those Tinder people started becoming couples and they started getting engaged and they started getting married. And so like now it's like a whole thing.
That's awesome.
And same thing with the other dating apps. Like I've only ever been on Tinder because again, I got on pretty early when it was technically, I guess, still a hookup app. But I like would always say, I'm really not here just to hook up with people. That's weird. Like not really into that. But like every guy would be like, no, like let's just get like coffee or like let's just hang out. Like you seem really nice. And I was like, all right. And so I don't know.
Well, that gives hopes to my friends that are still on Tinder right now. I'm thinking about you guys. Like you are a success story that I can share with them. That are like, look, it happened.
It's funny. All of Mike's friends have met on apps. Like and they're all engaged now.
Awesome.
Yeah, they all met on like Bumble or Tinder. I don't know what the other. I know there's Coffee Meets Bagel is one of them. There's a bunch. There's like one for everybody now.
My cousin met her husband on Coffee Meets Bagel. That's crazy.
Yeah,
I didn't even know that was the thing. I thought it was fake when she told me about it, and I was like, that doesn't sound real.
Yeah, I was like, what is that? What do you do with this? Yeah, it's a whole new world. I love it.
Yeah.
But again, too many options makes it kind of hard to weed through the weird shit.
Yeah. Oh, have you seen all the girls post on Little Brown Diary of all the terrible things that they like come across on dating apps?
I tend to not read them because I'm like, girl, I already know. I was on those apps.
It just makes me so glad I never had to go on
It's so weird. Well, now with Gen Z, there's also this whole DM culture where you meet via Instagram and like people slide into your DMs and it's like, like that's kind of weird.
That's weird.
But it's not. Again, Tinder was weird.
But then again, like I remember going on AIM chat to like chat groups on AIM and talking to random people that I met in like chat groups on AIM when I was like 13.
That's how I learned to type.
Yep.
AOL buddy.
That was our weird online hookup culture at 13, which you just stopped talking to that person.
Yeah, you're like, I'm bored now. Good night.
Yes.
Set that trendy away message of some angsty song lyric.
Right.
Shout out to All Time Low.
Oh God. Oh my God. I was listening to them the other day. I was like doing a throwback. God, I was so
14-year-old Disha, man.
Oh my God.
High hopes on velvet ropes all day.
Oh my God. Yes.
So good.
Oh yeah. 17-year-old Dipa thought she was like so emo, like so into her emotions.
Meanwhile, I think I've grown to learn I have like 3 feelings. So I'm pretty bad at my emotions.
Oh, same. That's something else that's come up on SAWIR that I actually responded to recently is like showing affection in your relationship, because that was really hard for me like in the beginning, because Austin like grew up in this family where they were like hugging and kissing and saying I love you all the time, and I did not grow up with that. Like most Indian families, like I think I can count on my one hand the amount of times I've heard my parents say I love you at all in general to anybody.
I'm like, do you even like each other? Like, how does
like,
it work?
Right? And like, do you never see anyone touching or holding hands? I remember the first time I saw my cousin and her husband holding hands, and I was like, oh my God. Like, it was so
it's like they're together.
Right? And so that was really weird for me. And I remember a post on there being like, how do you handle that? And I was like, it takes practice. Like, it genuinely like does. And Austin, like to this day, still has to remind me. He's like, you know, you haven't kissed me today yet. And I'm like, oh, sorry. Or like he has to grab my hand first sometimes, or like he just has to tell me that he needs like a hug or like affection in his life, which sounds so sad.
Mike just takes it upon himself.
Yeah,
and it took me a long time to get comfortable with it, because like you said, Mike also grew up in a household where like he saw people like hugging and kissing and holding hands, and then when he first started coming to like family events with me, he would like kiss me on the cheek or like hold my hand, and at first like, oh my God, you can't do that, like, and then it took a really long time for me because he would just be like, it's not that big of a deal, like you're like, now it's like you're my wife, like whatever. But it definitely took a little adjusting in front of like my family and like the Indian community to just like show affection, because I used to.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I remember at first, like, I was hesitant to hold his hand when my family was around and stuff, or just like sit next to him and like kind of be close to each other. And now it's totally fine because it's been a couple years. Or like now I almost find myself like almost leaning in for a kiss and then realizing my family's around, then being like, oh, never mind.
Like the Bollywood movie.
Yeah, like 90s. Leaning away. But sometimes like when no one's paying attention, he'll like really sneakily like give me a kiss or something, and it's really sweet. But he understands it and he gets it. But like now we will openly hold hands around my family, which is a big deal. And at my wedding, we did the whole like you may now kiss the bride thing, and I was like really nervous.
So cringe.
Like, oh, this is gonna be so weird, but we just like did it, and I just didn't think about it. Like I just had to like do it. And I was like, God, this is like the only time my family is probably going to see us like kiss in front of everyone. I was like, I'm going to weird out my entire family and do this.
Yep. When we had our little like American wedding, like that's what happened. I was like, oh, like we're going to kiss in front of everyone I know. I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. And like, but you know, it was fine.
Just go with it.
Yeah, everyone's
it, so.
Yeah, everyone's fine with it now.
Yeah.
They were fine with it then too. In my head, it was all in my head.
Right. Yeah, actually, my brother said this really cute thing to me at our wedding reception. He was like, I don't really get emotional or anything, but I saw you guys up there at our Western ceremony, and he's like, you guys just like really looks like you were in love and stuff, and I really want that too. And I'm like, that's just the nicest thing my brother's ever said to me.
That's also a new thing where like now at weddings, they're like those two people are really in love with each other. I feel like when we were younger, we went to weddings and stuff, like everyone, like the bride and groom looked super serious and like they barely looked like they liked each other, because it's like they didn't really know each other. And it was like a weird depiction of what love and marriage and stuff is, because like our culture, I feel like, doesn't, as much as we love Bollywood movies, does not really embrace the idea of loving someone else first.
Yes.
It's like more of a mutual agreement to like tolerate each other forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so like now with this new wave of weddings, it's so different to see even like an Indian or Hindu ceremony, like where those two people are like clearly in love with each other.
Yes.
And it's new for our parents to see.
I agree, because I remember always going to weddings and the bride and the groom would never smile and they would never like look like they were having fun. So I specifically remember making it a point that I was like, I'm gonna smile through my whole fucking wedding. Like I'm just gonna be smiling the whole time. I was like, I'm not gonna cry. Yeah. I'm just gonna be having a blast. And there are probably moments where I look like really annoyed in my pictures because I'm just like tired.
Yeah. Oh, it's exhausting.
And your face hurts from like all the smiling. And so I'm just like, okay,
like my cheek muscles weren't ready.
Yeah, but I seriously made it a point to smile as much as possible, especially when I was leaving. Like, you know, where they do that thing where you are brought to the car. And yes, that's the word for it. I don't know. And I literally made it a point to laugh and smile and like make jokes with like my family the whole time. I literally, like in the video, you can see me kind of joking about something and then pretending to run away to the car. Like, because I was like, I'm not going to make this sad. It's always so sad. And I'm like, I understand traditionally, like the girl was leaving the house for the first time and she's moving away from her family, possibly to like a different village or something. Yeah. And that's why it's sad. But I was like, that's not the case here. I'm not going anywhere. You guys are gaining a son and brother, cousin, whatever. And this is all great and happy. Yeah. So I was just like, and then my aunt is like the one person that's like bawling.
Yeah, my mom, all my aunts were bawling. Like, I cried because if I see my mom cry, I cry. It's just like a thing.
Oh, if my dad had cried, I would have cried. But he didn't cry. He was also laughing. So
but I also was like, I'm gonna see you tomorrow.
Yeah, like literally tonight I'm gonna see you.
Yeah, I'm gonna see you in about 3 hours, but I'm also gonna stop by the house tomorrow. Like, it's fine.
Yes.
And like we have this perfect little setup where like our families and us, it's like a triangle. Like Mike and I live like 10 minutes from both of them, and they both live like probably like not even 3 miles from each other. Yeah. And so it's like this perfect little triangle. I'm like, we see you all like all the time. Everyone calm down.
Yeah, literally. Like, it's fine. We're not like not going to see each other.
Yeah. And I feel like that's also like a different vibe where like Indian wedding ceremonies are now not just like you said, like the bride is leaving her family and her home. It's like, no, we are now combining 2 families in a very literal sense, because like we do all these like holidays and stuff together now. You know, like Mike's family is always invited to my aunts and uncles' houses, and the same thing goes the other way. And like it's more fun. It's not this like weird like, oh, she's not one of us anymore. It's like, it's fine.
I agree. Like Austin's grandmother comes to all of the events that my family has, and she'll come to Garba, Navratri, and like Diwali. She came to India with us last year. It was her second time going out of the country. And she's in her late 70s, and I do not know how she handled India. Because it was like a long flight. We had like 3 connections, and then like just because my family lives in like kind of like, we don't live in the city. Like my family lives in a village in Gujarat, but we stay in like a slightly larger city that's next to it where I have other family houses there. So like it's still pretty small. It's not as modern as like New Delhi or Mumbai or any of the other bigger places. So, but she handled it like a champ. And I'm just like, Grandma, like, I don't know how you did it. Like she didn't really eat a lot, but just the whole she was like, I would 100% go back to India. Like, okay. But she like, I think the fact that her grandson married an Indian girl was like meant to be, because she loves jewelry and she loves anything shiny and flashy and like glittery. And so Indian culture and Indian fashion was 100% like made for her.
Yeah, it's her element. She's ready.
Totally her element. She wears her Indian jewelry on a daily basis.
That's so funny you say that, because Mike's mom got us, we actually went last night to see Taj Express, which is like essentially like Bollywood, but in like theater format. And they do all like the big songs that you've seen in the movies. And I had no idea what this was. I didn't even know it was a thing. And months ago, she like texted us. She goes, "Make sure you're free this night. I got tickets to this show." I was like, "All right, whatever." And we ended up looking up the show like a couple hours before we were going, and it was like, "Oh, this is very Indian. Like
Yeah.
this isn't like Aladdin on Broadway. This is like, oh, everyone there is gonna be brown, you
Yeah.
know?" And I mean, that was obviously wasn't the case, but like, she literally was like, "So like, do you think people will be wearing Indian clothes there? Because I have Indian clothes." And I'm like, "No, you can just wear whatever you want, Michelle. Like, this is New Jersey."
Yeah.
She was just like, "I have stuff like I could totally wear it." I'm like, "No, it's fine."
She just wants to show off her clothes. It's great.
Yeah.
Like, that's hilarious.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
she's the one who like totally like found the show and bought the tickets and like
Mhm.
invited like, you know, Mike's whole family to go, and like we're there with his brother and Mike and me and her, and she brought her friends. And
Yeah.
I'm like, my parents didn't even know this existed, and like you like of your own accord were like, "We're gonna go to this, it's gonna be so fun." And like she knew all the songs because they were at our wedding.
Oh my God. How cute. I absolutely love that she did that.
It was
I just
cool.
recently heard about that show. I think it's like coming to Indiana soon. So I was like, ooh.
It was great. Highly recommend. Super fun.
Yeah. I need
Really
to look
fun.
into it.
It was very like almost like a parody of like Bollywood movies. So it was just if you grew up with it, it was very funny and entertaining, and the dancers are so talented. So talented.
Yeah, I exclusively listened to early 2000s, late 90s Bollywood, and that's exclusively what I made them play at our wedding.
Love it. Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham all day.
Literally just showed that movie to my friends like 3 weeks ago. I was like, you guys have to watch this movie.
Yep. It was great. It was a good time all around.
Love it.
All right. How did you guys, because you said you had an American, like the white dress wedding, and then you had like the 600 people Indian wedding.
Yeah.
Did you do that like all together, like in one shot? Because we split ours up. We had like a few months between.
So we did it all in one weekend, which like looking back, I should have just done it all in one day, which sounds crazy, but I think it would have been better. So Thursday was our Mehndi, Friday was our, what's it called? Haldi and Sangeet and Garba and all that. And then Saturday was our Indian wedding. And it was just the wedding that day. And then we had a dinner afterwards. We didn't do any sort of reception or anything, just dinner. Which I kind of wish we did because everyone ate dinner and left. So there's people to this day who are like, "Oh, your wedding was so great." And I was like, "I didn't even know you were there," because I didn't see everyone.
Because 600 people is a lot to say hi to.
Yes, it is. And then Sunday was our garden ceremony. And that was like the ceremony for like 10-15 minutes and then the full reception and everything afterwards. And the reason we separated the two was because my parents didn't want alcohol at my Indian wedding because they're fairly religious. So they agreed to let us have wine and beer and cider at our reception. So we separated that completely. And then we also had Qdoba cater our reception. Because we had Indian food the other 3 days, like only Indian food from Mandir. So like, and my husband's not a big fan of Mandir food. He honestly didn't eat that much at our wedding.
Neither is Mike, but he loves like anything with chicken and fish and stuff.
Yes.
So like Mandir food is all vegetarian. It's mostly like rice and sweets and stuff.
Yeah. So it wasn't really his thing. Also, my parents changed the menu like 3 times and they took out everything that we suggested. So that was like a whole different thing. So I'm pretty sure like we went home after our Indian wedding and either he had Taco Bell, I'm pretty sure, or something. And then after our American wedding, I'm pretty sure we stopped at McDonald's and went home and passed out. To McDonald's.
By the end of that, it's like running a marathon. You're just like, I'm done.
Right?
Like, it's a lot.
But yeah, we separated. It was 4 days. We separated all. Everyone was fully exhausted by the end of it. But we had a good time. And when everyone left, I was like, man, I kind of miss like having my family around and like having all my friends around and just like, can we just hang out and not get married?
Yeah, that was the best part is like having for like 4 days, like your closest family members and all of your best friends and like everyone is there hanging out together all the time. Like we should do this more. So like we're hosting Thanksgiving and I invited like my whole like immediate family and like our aunts and uncles that are closest and like Mike's side. And then we just also like invited my friends.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh, you know everybody now.
Yeah.
Like, you know all my aunts and uncles, and they all know who you are. And like, we had so much fun, so let's do it again.
Did your family celebrate Thanksgiving growing up?
Kind of. So like, I wasn't raised vegetarian. We
Mm-hmm.
ate like chicken and fish and stuff. We didn't eat beef or pork. But on
Mm-hmm.
Thursdays, we do like guruar. So like,
Mm-hmm.
they fasted all day and whatever. So my family, what's really convenient is they do Thanksgiving on Friday. So
Mm-hmm.
there's no conflict with our families because Thursday we do Mike's family and then Friday or Saturday we do like our family.
Yeah.
But yeah, we didn't do like the full blown like the sit down dinner with the whole like 9 yards. Like, but our whole
Mm-hmm.
families, because it's like, what else are we gonna do on that day? Would still get
Right.
together and spend time together.
Yeah.
But
See,
it's new to have a very traditional Thanksgiving like with Mike's family.
that is really different for me because my parents never celebrated Thanksgiving, so they honestly thought Thanksgiving was just about turkey. They had no idea what Thanksgiving was about because no one had ever explained it to them. Like, they just didn't catch on to it, which I don't know how my mom didn't, because my mom has been in the US and she was like 14 or 15. Like, she went to high school here. She should have known what Thanksgiving was. But we just never really celebrated it. So that was just like a normal day in my house that we just didn't have to go to school. We just kind of hung out. And then it wasn't until me and my brother and my cousins got older that we're like, why don't we celebrate Thanksgiving? Like, it's just about family and you don't have to eat turkey. You can literally eat anything and you just have a big dinner with your family. So in the last few years, we have like kind of made our family get together. And like a couple years ago, we had vada pav and pani puri for Thanksgiving.
Love it. Yeah, we're bringing like goat biryani and stuff into the mix.
Yeah.
It's more fun. You could do whatever you want.
It is.
That's the
It
best
is.
part.
Yeah.
I always
But
say that, like, about being like married to someone who isn't Indian. Like, there's no rules. We just do whatever we want. It's great.
you just make it up. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have like the traditional like Thanksgiving with Austin's grandmother, and like we go to a family friend's house with his grandmother, and then like with my family, I'm like, let's just all get together and make some food and eat it. Like,
Yeah, exactly. It
that's
doesn't
what we
have to
do.
be turkey. It could be
It's great.
anything.
Epitome of being Indian American.
Yep. It's great. Are you vegetarian or like any dietary restrictions, I guess?
So I grew up vegetarian. I'm not anymore, but I only eat like chicken and seafood. So poultry and seafood, but I still don't eat any red meat. I just tell people I don't eat anything with four legs. Um, and then
That works.
someone's like, I'm going to find a three-legged cow. And I was like, they're not supposed to have three legs, so that doesn't count.
Yeah, it's still a cow.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I just choose not to eat it because I don't feel like it, and I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything.
Yeah. Because that
My
always
parents,
becomes a thing, especially if you're raised vegetarian, like navigating like that just dinner every day. Like it becomes something you have to do every day, and that's always interesting to see how people like get around it.
yeah. Austin's pretty cool with it. Like, he doesn't, every once in a while he'll like crave like a burger, or like he'll ask me to make like chili or something for him, and I'm cool with that. I don't mind cooking it for him and making that. And then most of the days we eat the same thing, but there are certain times where I'll just make like a big batch of something for him and he can eat that for a couple of days, and I can eat whatever I want for a couple of days.
Yeah.
So it works out. It's just, if you're very strict about what meat is touching your pots and pans or your plates, like my parents are very, very strict about that, and they didn't, when he was living together, they didn't want him to bring any meat into the house and stuff, and so he had to leave it in like an outside fridge in the garage if he brought like leftovers from somewhere home. So it just, yeah, if it's like that, then it may not work out, but you just have to, I'm not that strict. So
Yeah. I think there's definitely flexibility that in any relationship that you need, but like in certain areas, like with our situations, like I think there's even more like adjusting. And like I said, I feel like that just becomes a part of embracing like American culture as well as expecting the other person to embrace your culture.
yeah.
And just like, because there is so much pressure. I felt like that, like, oh, Mike has to fit in and understand like our religion and our culture. And like in some families, there might be pressure to like convert and stuff. Like, luckily there is none on my part, but I always like try to keep in mind, like, I also have to understand like his culture and where he's coming from and the way he wants to celebrate things like Thanksgiving and Christmas and like all of those traditions that he has. Because sometimes I feel like we almost get so wrapped up in remembering that, like, oh, like they have to understand where we're coming from because it's so foreign. But there are parts that I think are still foreign, like how to dress for like an American wedding. Like that took me a little while to figure out because I didn't grow up going to them, or like how to dress, like going to like maybe church or Easter, and like Easter was like a whole other thing for me. I was like, what happens?
What is
like,
Easter?
Yeah, what is Easter? What do you do? Like, how does this work? What do I wear? Do we go somewhere? What time do I have to be ready? Do I have to be there on time? Like, all these things.
Yeah. I think like Austin's not particularly like religious or anything like that. So he doesn't go to church, and his grandmother doesn't go to church. So we never had to do any of that. But I think it was like navigating holidays and things like that. Like she has Christmas at our house every year, and we go to Thanksgiving at a family friend's house every year, and just navigating the relationships there and how everything works. Like they pray before Thanksgiving, so I had to like hold hands with everyone and bow my head and like just be respectful of that custom and like how to handle myself. So that was different, but I think it's nice kind of having two different religions, because then you never have to decide where you're going to be on a certain holiday, because like your holidays are split, so you always know where you're gonna go. Like, okay, it's Christmas, like, okay, we're going to this side of the family, because like, or it's a Diwali, like, all right, we have to go hang out with my parents. Like, it's kind of nice not to have to like share the holidays with anybody.
Yeah, the only holiday like we sort of have to navigate for us is Christmas, because my family like does do Christmas, and like we have everyone get together. But luckily, because all my cousins are so young, they don't wake up till like noon. Whereas like Mike's family's older and they're like ready to go at like 8 a.m. So like Mike and I just like dip into his family from 8 a.m. to like whatever. And then around noon, we're like with my family. And again, we've sort of combined it so much to a point where there's like not a ton of separation, because Mike's family is so small.
Yeah.
And I have the definitely bigger family, and like they've just integrated just everything. But that's the only one where like sometimes we have to like figure out like planning if we're seeing his like extended family who lives farther away, like how are we getting to see everybody? But it's pretty easy because like you said, like there's not a whole ton of overlap.
Yeah.
We just do our own thing. What's like the one thing that you've learned through like the whole experience? Like if there's one major thing you learned, what would it be?
Oh my God, that's a big question.
I know.
I think kind of the first thing that comes to mind is compromise. It's a lot of give and take, I think, especially even like with my parents. It's like my parents want us to do certain things. Like they want us to come to like Monday or like come to certain events or, do things in a certain way. And it's like, okay, if I said absolutely no all the time, it would cause big issues. So it's a compromise. So it's like, okay, I will go to my parents' event, or I will go to this like lecture at Monday or something, even though I don't necessarily really want to go. I'll do it because it shows my parents that we are both making an effort, and I'll bring Austin with me and Austin will go too. And so it's like compromise. It's like you have to balance all these things that your parents expected and kind of want for you and also all the things that you want. And compromise within relationships too, like we were talking about with just the different cultural expectations and stuff. Like Austin might be totally down for getting dressed up and like going to Garba or something, but he might not want to do this other thing. And that's totally fine. Like you're allowed to have that compromise, or even the other way around. If there's something, which he doesn't have a lot of like family or like religious stuff that we have to go to on his end, but it's learning to understand one another and learning to give and take. And I think particularly with parents and families, like they just want to know that you are not losing that part of your culture and that part of your upbringing, and that you're still ingrained in it. So you just kind of have to like show them, like, you just kind of have to be like, okay, well, I will do this thing for you because I just want you to see that I'm still here and making an effort.
Yeah.
If it means a lot to my parents, then I will go and do it, even if I don't really want to.
Exactly. Same. Like sometimes I just entertain my parents like need to like have me do certain things, so I do it. Like after the wedding, I guess like the day after, the girl has to go do like the ganku, the red hands, and like put it on the wall of the house because it means she has left the house or whatever.
Yes.
And I was like, Mom, this is ridiculous. Like, what? I live down the street. Like, you can get there in about 10 minutes. You know, like, what? And, you know, I entertained it. I did it. The mark is still there on her brick wall. It was just like, okay, all right. Like, I'll do it for you, but I don't understand.
Yeah.
There's also like little things like that.
Yeah. And I'm sure like that's especially going to be important like when we have kids and stuff too, because I know my parents are going to like want to do specific things with them or like for them in the specific like ceremonies and stuff. And I'm just like, I genuinely like don't really care that much. Like I don't think it's that important. Yeah. Austin's not going to care that much either, but I'm going to be like, fine, I will let them do these things. Yes. Like as
and I think it's okay to like almost like just like amuse our parents even though we don't agree with it, and I don't think it's a crime to not agree with it. And it goes back to the whole idea of like not insulting someone for being too American or letting parts of their culture go that just don't make sense anymore. Like it's fine, it's not a big deal. And I feel like other people can be really judgy about that, because I know like I don't know which group it was in. I feel like there's so many Facebook groups now, but like someone said something about like religion and like marrying outside of your own religion or culture and like why you would or wouldn't do it. And someone commented, it was like, well, I actually care about my religion, so I would never date someone who, and I'm like, all right, well, that has nothing to do. It was like, there was so much like shade in that comment. And like, obviously I don't know the tone she used, but she used the word actually. So in my head, I'm like, oh, you just think you're better than everyone because like you actually care about your religion. Apparently that has something to do with choosing to stay within your culture or not. And I was just like, I care about my culture and my religion too, but that doesn't stop me from like marrying Mike either. It just means I work that much harder to preserve what I want.
And actually, I think it's like taught me like how to be more involved with my culture and like my religion and stuff, because now I have to teach it to somebody else, like the parts that I want passed on and I want him to understand. And so I have to fully understand, like I can't just assume that they know, because if you've grown up in it, you grow up with a certain amount of religion and culture no matter what. So you just get it and you do it. But he's like, okay, no, why are we doing this? Or like, what's the purpose of this, or the story behind it?
To understand why I think it's important.
Right.
Not just because my parents told me it's important and I was raised with like, I have to sit there and like sometimes go on Google and like look everything up and realize this is why this is important. Or maybe read it and realize, oh, maybe this isn't that important.
Exactly. Like I've done that a lot just because I'm like, what does this actually mean? Or why are we actually doing this? I'm like, I don't remember. Sorry, I didn't remember what I learned in Soka class as a child.
Exactly. It's like sometimes I didn't pay attention or just didn't go. Like I didn't go for very long. So there's a lot of things I don't know, and it's almost forcing me to like learn it now as an adult and try to find those resources where you can learn it, because that's hard to find. Because I feel like going to temple, like you don't learn by diffusion. Like it's not how it works. Someone has to explain all of this to me. So I'm still working on that.
Yeah, I agree. I honestly feel like I wish the older generation had explained things to us more. Like I just, even during my wedding, I was like, why are we doing this? And my parents could not tell me. Our priest did a pretty good job. He did like a rehearsal with us, which almost never happens in Indian weddings. He had us come over to his house and we did like a rehearsal and he kind of explained things to us. So that was really nice because honestly, we both left there and Austin was like, Indian weddings are a lot more romantic than I thought they would be. And I was like, I know, right? Because he was kind of explaining.
You don't expect that at all.
Right? And it's actually very beautiful and like very romantic and loving, but no one ever explains that to you. So like you just go with it. But I think that's the beauty of like kind of it forces people to look at why they're doing what they're doing. Or even with language, like I understand Gujarati. I'm terrible at speaking it. Like I could also never go to India by myself because I would just be an absolute mess and I wouldn't be able to navigate anything. But like I have to now teach it to Austin because my family will just start talking to him in Gujarati and be like, you know what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, you totally heard it, right? It makes sense to you.
And sometimes he does pick it up, especially if it's like my mom saying something, he can get the context of stuff. But like I now have to teach it to him and I'm like, why did no one teach me this? Like I don't know. Like sometimes I just know words, I just know what they are and I don't know how to explain like
I definitely understand a lot. I understand everything, but sometimes I struggle to come up with the language to say sometimes, especially because I don't use it as much as I used to. But it's also really funny because like our ears are so tuned to hearing like Gujarati letters and the language and stuff. And it's kind of hilarious the way Mike hears it sometimes because like the other day my cousins and I were explaining like Mataji means goddess, right? And the first thing without a thought in his mind comes out of Mike's mouth. He goes, "Oh, like Babaji," and I'm like, to him it pretty much sounds the same,
I can see
we
that.
were dying. Like he just very nonchalant, like, "Oh, like Babaji," and just like carries on.
Yeah.
And there's so many moments like that where it's like, yeah, you don't have the same letters as us in English, so you just hear things differently. Yeah. And like sometimes you can't discriminate it all the time. It was really funny. We have so many moments like that.
Yeah, there's times where Austin will come home and be like, so mom said this today, what is it? And I was like, I have no idea what you're saying because the way he heard it and the way he's pronouncing it is way off. Yeah. And then I have to like kind of play like this guessing game and figure out the context of it. And then eventually I'll come up with it. But I didn't speak enough Gujarati growing up, and now he's like, you need to learn this because I want to learn it. I was like, I'm sorry, I talk in English.
You need to be more brown.
Right? That's basically what it was. It's like to my own husband telling me I need to be more brown because like I literally talk to my entire family in English and I only will speak Gujarati if I absolutely had to, just because I messed it up so much when I was a kid that I got very self-conscious about it and I just stopped. And I'm like, oh, well, that was bad because I should have kept going with it. And, you know, now it would be very helpful because I have younger cousins who can speak fluently in Gujarati. And I'm like, holy crap, like, how do you know how to do that?
Yeah, I'm fluent in it. It's just like as I get older, it's harder and harder to stay fluent in it because luckily, like, I still speak it to my grandma and stuff like that. But I know exactly what you mean. You get very self-conscious, and I notice it happening to me. But I, like, force myself to get past it because I'm like, I don't want other people's judgment to stop me from, like, trying to maintain this.
Right. That's where I'm at now. Like, now I'm like, okay, I'm just going to stay, especially if I'm in India or I'm surrounded by people who I know like I need to speak Gujarati to. Like my aunt recently came from India and I had to drive her somewhere for an hour. So it's just the two of us in the car and I had to speak Gujarati. So I made a really good effort at trying to do it. And she knew what I was talking about and she helped me along the way. And so I was like, yeah, this is fine. Like I can keep doing this. Like I can continue to learn and just try and not care anymore about what anyone else is thinking.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. You just got to do it. It's like any language, I think. It's been like 2 hours. I feel like we should probably wrap it up.
I just keep like running us off on tangents.
I know, but that's good though, because I feel like so many people listen and they're just like, I get a lot of like, so when's the next one out? I'm like, Mondays, guys, Mondays. And like, there's just so much to say on it. Like I said, like this podcast was started because even though like, yeah, we're all dating outside of our culture, but every story is so unique and so different that like it's not really the same story twice. It's never just like, oh, I was scared to tell my parents and then it was horrible and then they kicked me out. Like that's not usually what happens.
Yeah.
And taking the time to explain that that's not what usually happens.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, it's not so bad. Thanks so much for being on. Any final thoughts? Any words of wisdom?
Come join us at SAWIR, South Asian Women in Interracial Relationships. We're on Facebook. We have almost 1,000 members, I think. Last time I checked, it was like 900 something. Nice. And that's in like 6 or 7 months. So we're a huge community. We're here for you. Anything that you're dealing with, someone in our community has probably also dealt with it. So you're not alone, and you will make it through whatever it is that you are going through. And you've got a whole community of sisters behind you. So come join us.
Yeah, definitely do. I'm in it too, so you come say hi. They're great. Like, so great. I remember when I found that group, I was like, oh my God, my humans. I spent like an hour just like scrolling to the end of time on that page the first time I found it. I was like, I didn't think like other people were like doing the same thing as me. Like, yes, I saw like a handful of other people, but I always felt like I was the only one who, like, my parents were having a really hard, I was scared to tell my parents and like, we're going to have a hard time with it. And then like that group has been like amazing. They're great. Definitely check them out. They're up on Facebook.
Yeah, huge shout out to Rabia for that, because she's the one who, after I made a post on Little Brown Diary, I just like, it was our anniversary in May, and I was like, hey, here's my husband, and he's really cute, and he does all these things, and is anyone else in an interracial relationship? And and I got literally thousands of likes and comments on that, and she was the one person that was like, let's start a group. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to run a Facebook group. And then she just started it, and she's like, do you want to help me with this? And I was like, sure. And like, that's
how it works. You just got to do it.
And I had no idea what I was doing. Like, no idea that many people would join it, or it would spark a podcast. Literally a dream come true to be on a podcast, by the way. God.
I thought like 3 people were going to listen to this. I don't know anything about podcasting. I don't know anything about how this works. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it, and we're going to figure it out along the way, and like figure out how to Skype people in if they can't be here in person. And we've just been doing it, and like I launched that, and like out of the woodwork, just people crawling out and like messaging me, and like, oh my God, the first 48 hours were insane. I could not get off my phone because I just had to keep up with like the messages and the shares, and just like people messaging me saying they could relate and like how much they loved hearing it. It's crazy. But
it's like it's almost like all of us had no idea that there was like all these other people out there, and we found a way to connect, and it's incredible. And I'm sorry, my phone just went off, and I forgot that it was by my lap. It's sitting right next to my laptop.
No, it's all good.
I'm just so happy that we all have found each other, and we're just like making all these connections, and it's just like a whole new beautiful world that we're going to go into.
Yeah.
God, can you imagine all the really cute little like brown mixed babies there's going to be in the next like 5 to 10 years? I'm dying thinking.
I can't wait. I can't wait for all the like confused little babies I'm going to have. They're going to be like, well, I don't know what's going on. Like, we just do whatever we want. I'm like, yep, that's
so
it.
Wonderful. Yeah.
I'm so excited. All right. Well, thank you so much. Yeah. And hopefully share this wherever you like. Do your thing.
Of course, I will. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of But What Will People Say? If you enjoyed it, make sure you like, comment, share, leave us a review, send this to someone you think would love to hear it. And we'll see you guys next time. As always, you can find us on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, and YouTube. You can message me on Instagram at DishesByDishes, and shoot us an email if you want to be on the show or have any questions at BWWPS podcast@gmail.com. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.